One of the nicest things about having an unmonetized channel with only a few subscribers, well, it's still over 1,000, but small channel, is that thankfully I don't think I've caught the attention of the bots and the AI algorithms and so on, such that when people do write comments on my videos, I get the impression that they are actually real live human people. There have been times where I wondered if one or two were bots, and then they've come back and replied in such a way that I think, well, if they're not human, then AI has gotten so good that I may as well assume that people that I see on the street are walking androids or something. There's this one guy recently who has replied to a number of my videos, but he wrote something in response to the video that I posted yesterday, tonight's rant, March 17th, 2026. And I found it very interesting. As someone who used to study English lit, it felt like a poem of sorts, where for the first part of the poem, he's saying one thing, and then there's a definite shift in the writing where I go, oh, okay, is this what he was really trying to get at? So I just thought it was worth now working through his comments to see where and why the shift occurred and what he's actually trying to say, in the hopes of responding to him in a way that is positive for him. So this guy's name is Byzantium Emperor. Love the name. Obviously Orthodox based. He writes, "You reminded me of something I was thinking about the other day. Ever since I came to the UK for university, it's been very eye-opening with how secular everything is here." Well, I went to Durham, and I totally know that feeling. Like I said, that when I started doing the PhD, the first thing that I was told was a theology department is the worst place to study theology because it's incredibly secular. And I remember my first talk was G.K. Chesterton and the laughter at the heart of the gospel. The first 45 minutes of that hour-long talk went really well. And then the last 15 minutes where I said, okay, now let's take everything that I've said about Chesterton and so on, and how do we apply it to how we share the gospel today. And that's when all the wind got sucked out of the room. And people that had been, so engaged with me for the first 45 minutes, some of them left, some of them I just completely lost the audience. And I remember afterwards, I thought, what happened? Like, I was going so well. And somebody said, we don't do God here. And it was in the theology department. So yes, he writes, it's incredibly jarring. And coming from a place where Christianity is the norm, it's incredibly jarring. Oh, I'm not sure where Byzantium Emperor comes from. I'm thinking like Romania, but his English is too good. He's probably not. But yeah, where are you from, Byzantium Emperor? People here have this despair about them. There is little hope for the future, but are also willing to defend this certain strain of liberalism, although this has been changing in recent years. All right, boom. This is where the cutoff comes. So I want to reply to what he said there, and then you'll find that the rest of his message, it's almost like a non sequitur. He starts talking about something else, and that's this Byzantium. This is not a criticism. It's almost like I'm kind of seeing your the flow of your thought. It's like you kind of started saying something, and then you kind of got to what you wanted to really talk about, like halfway through the message, or maybe not. I don't know, but this is just my reading of it. You're absolutely right that people have this despair about them, that they don't have a hope for the future. I'm 47, almost 48, and I come from a generation where the generation above me, I always had friends that were older than me. I never had friends. I never really gelled with the people of my own like immediate generation. I have few friends. I have one or two incredibly devoted, incredibly wonderful friends that are my age, but we're literally talking one or two. You know, they go back to like school age and all that sort of thing. But in general, most of my friends have been 10 to 20 years older than me. And particularly with my English friends, the English friends always liked me. They befriended me initially when I was young because I was fit. I was banging everybody. I was just, you know, had that kind of alpha vibe about me where, I was intelligent, but at the same time, I didn't really care about anything. It was, I could talk about Voltaire or Baudelaire or discourse on Iranian history, while at the same time, what I really wanted to do was just bang the nearest hot chick. So there was a kind of accessibility to my pseudo intellectualism, most of which I have to say, the stuff that I knew when I was 20, it's all bullshit. But anyway. Yeah, so I have these older friends, and where I'm going with this is that these older friends all had and have, because I'm still friends with them, the same hubris. These English ones, particularly, they all are kind of raised on the belief that Douglas Adams, the answer to the meaning of life is 42. That Terry Pratchett, that Christopher Hitchens, Carl Sagan, that these guys all explain to you reality, how it actually is. There is something that I find agonizingly and nostalgically tender about them, because they have a very pronounced whimsy for the past, for the good old days of old English towns, old English pubs, church bells, and so on, while at the same time they have they've never matured out of their 14-year-old view of the Bible and rejection of it. If you start talking about Christianity, they'll immediately revert to, well, you would think Noah actually spent 3 days inside of a whale. They've never allowed their minds to think that, that genre actually matters, that might actually be a symbol, or they don't even consider it. They consider themselves to be scientifically minded, whereas if you actually ask them for, well, give me the mathematical arguments for why we know the earth is round, which it is, but how do you know? And they'll immediately start saying, well, we see ships go over the horizon, and we've had pictures of it from space. Okay, pictures from it from space aren't necessarily true. And what I'm saying is that they're easily fakeable, but you can't fake the maths, right? Whereas and ships going over the horizon, that's a terrible argument. The P90X brings them back into focus. Yeah, they go over the horizon eventually, but when you're just looking at them and they appear to go over the horizon, that's a perspectival thing. That's not actually them going over the curve. If they were going over the curve after only being 7 miles away from you, then the planet would be really, really effing small, and it's not. So they're right for the wrong reasons. Their ignorance is being bolstered by a bad education that they think is actually the pinnacle of knowledge. So you're right that these friends, they walk around, though they're so certain in their science, and everything is a joke, in the sense that they have this wry sense of humor that they think is Terry Pratchett and so on. But ultimately, you find that their sense of humor is actually not very much Terry Pratchett. It's sarcasm, not irony. That they're all very sad. But they've embraced that sadness and think that and have sort of recast themselves as being the kind of pagan guard standing to attention in Pompeii while Vesuvius is erupting, knowing that what he's doing is completely pointless. I'm a guard. Why would I follow the rules and guard this place while literally the world is falling down around my face? but I stay the course until the end. They think of themselves that way, but it's nothing so romantic as that. No, it's just that they've embraced this worldview of despair, and not even with good reason. They've just embraced this worldview that came about in a very generation that sought to subvert everything and poke fun at all forms of authoritarianism. So, in that desperate lunge for this kind of Luciferian individualism, they threw everything out with the bathwater, including the baby Jesus, including their ability to even know the good, the true, and the beautiful. They'll pay lip service to it to some extent. They'll say there's still beautiful Irish songs. There's still this. So there's still this longing within all of them. But if you ever try to verbalize it and say, well, it's a concrete longing that makes sense because we want to be united with God in some way, then suddenly their Carl Sagan filter comes on and says, no, 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 show me the evidence, show me the evidence. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. Yeah, nice catchphrase, bitch. That just means I won't believe a miracle unless you show me another miracle, and even then I'll think I'm hallucinating. I mean, it's just so stupid, you know. So, okay, let's move on. Those are thoughts. Again, nothing's a closed argument. It's the start of more conversation. Then he kind of shifts, and this is where I think that Byzantium Emperor is kind of getting to what he wanted to talk about. He's saying people who defend evil ideologies justify themselves with constant expectations of catastrophe, as if we were in an endless state of warlike emergency that required the suspension of moral order. Now he's talking about Trump. Now he's talking about the Iran war. And now he's talking about dispensationalism. They stifle dissent as if even the mention of their error will force them to face the truth of it. Sorry for the ramble. Well, no, that wasn't a ramble. That was actually pretty concise, dude. You captured a lot of thoughts in a, you know, it's a bit of a chunk of a paragraph, but only because it's a small, narrow column makes it look longer than it is. It's just a few sentences. So good job, man. Yeah, I think that we are looking at a time that is making us question who we are as Christians. As I said in the last rant, I'm just amazed by how many people think that Christianity is this very recent modern heresy of thinking that, you know, we have to uphold Israel as a physical place and do whatever the nation state of Israel says we have to do, or else we are anti-Christian. But no, what's worse, anti-Semitic. Think of it. I'm not even being fey here. It's if somebody says you're anti-Christian, well, nobody cares. It's like, that's not very nice. But if you say you're anti-Semitic, boom, that gets you put in jail. So which religion are we really following at this point? Right? The one that gets you, oh man, that's not very nice. Or the one that is, if you deviate from it, you get put in jail. So we are, ever since the, okay, I have to be careful about what I say on YouTube. We are at a point in time where the message of Christianity is being severely diluted and controlled by another interest group that for all of Christian history has always been seen as the enemies of Christianity. I'm not saying that necessarily they are. I'm not making that argument necessarily that they deserve that title. But the fact is, it's only in the last 100 years that the perennial enemies of Christianity are now suddenly our big brothers in the faith. Maybe that's a step forward in a way. A step forward toward what? It's a step away from the claim to actual truth and toward a rhetorically nice sounding word that isn't grounded in anything that has traditionally come before it. Yeah. Yeah.